The sky of Exorthal was dim, the landscape painted in soft hues of violet and teal as twilight settled over the alien forest. Jared, a seasoned xenobiologist from Earth, was enraptured by the beauty of this world. He'd spent days cataloging plants and observing animal behaviors, logging every detail about the strange, bioluminescent life forms for the Voyager's research archives. The creatures of Exorthal were unlike anything on Earth. They were translucent, their skin glowing with shifting colors like stained glass under a sunset. Jared found himself in awe of one creature in particular, a grack, a feline-like animal with 3 long, sleek legs, a tail adorned with barbed spines, and markings that pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Jared had been observing her from afar, fascinated by her fluid movements and intense gaze. But tonight, curiosity had pushed him too far. He moved through a dense patch of violet shrubs closer than he should have. A twig snapped underfoot, and the grack turned sharply, her eyes fixed on him with a wild, startled energy. In a blur of movement, her tail whipped forward, and Jared felt a sharp sting in his shoulder as one of her barbs pierced his skin. Pain surged through him as he stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. The grack's eyes widened, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. The creature looked at him, her bioluminescent patterns flickering as if she were trying to understand what had just happened. She hadn't meant to harm him, he could see that. But in that split-second reaction, she'd injured him. As Jared collapsed to the ground, his vision blurred. He knew the barb had delivered a minor dose of venom, not enough to kill, but enough to make his muscles burn with each breath. Despite the pain, he forced himself to remain calm. Grabbing his field pack, he began to treat his injury as best he could. Raal, the grack, whom Jared would later learn was named Raal, watched from the shadows. Her instinct was to flee, yet something held her there, her gaze locked on the wounded human. She was as puzzled by him as he was by her. On Exorthal, injured animals typically withdrew, tending to their wounds in isolation until they healed. It was simply the way of survival here. So when Raal saw the human applying pressure to his wound, calmly reaching for a small, strange object that sprayed a clear liquid, she was baffled. He didn't retreat. Instead, Jared applied a strip of cloth to his shoulder, securing it tightly with something that sparkled in the dim light. She could sense his pain, the shallow way he was breathing, and yet he continued working methodically, muttering softly to himself. The words were unintelligible to Raal, but she found herself inching closer, curiosity outweighing fear. As Jared continued to bind his wound, he noticed her approach. A wary smile crossed his face as he looked into her luminous eyes. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," he said softly, his voice calm despite the pain. "I shouldn't have startled you." Raal tilted her head, picking up on the gentle tones. Though she couldn't understand his words, she sensed his intent. His voice wasn't filled with anger or fear, but with something else, something warm. Compassion. She stepped closer, her bioluminescent markings casting soft light onto his face as she sniffed the air around him. Her instincts told her to leave, to run back to the safety of the forest, but she stayed, feeling an inexplicable pull toward this strange, resilient creature. The human and the grack. Jared, fighting off dizziness, extended his hand slowly, inviting her touch. Raal hesitated, then nuzzled her head against his fingers, her skin warm and almost electric. Jared chuckled, the sound soft but comforting to her ears. "You're amazing, you know that?" he whispered, eyes drooping as he struggled to stay conscious. She didn't understand the words, but his tone reassured her. For reasons she couldn't explain, she wanted to help him. The forest settled into silence as Raal lay beside him, providing warmth as his body shook from the venom's effects. Jared's eyes fluttered closed, and as he drifted off, he felt her bioluminescent glow soothing him, a presence that eased his pain. Morning on Exorthal. At dawn, the rest of the Voyager crew found them, Jared slumped against a tree, and Raal lying close by, keeping him warm. When the crew approached, Raal sprang to her feet, retreating into the shadows, but not without one last look at Jared. As he stirred awake, Jared's eyes met hers, a silent exchange passing between them. She had saved him in her own way, stayed with him through the night when she could have left him alone. The grack melted into the forest, her glowing patterns flickering one last time before disappearing among the trees. Jared felt a pang of loss as she vanished, but he knew he'd carry her memory forever. She had been wild, foreign, and yet they had shared a moment of understanding that transcended worlds. Back on Earth, Jared would tell the story of the alien grack who injured him by mistake, but stayed with him when he needed her most. And somewhere on the distant planet of Exorthal, Raal would remember the strange human who had, in his own fragile way, shown her a compassion she had never known. In a universe filled with endless stars, they had been strangers brought together for a single night, leaving behind a bond neither of them would forget.